2015 Longview City Council work session is now called to order. We'll go straight to discussion items. We will discuss matters related to the city's budget and tax levy, including without limitation the history of and projections for city revenues and expenditures, as well as various potential revenues and expenditures.
Mayor and council, if I'll
Mr. Willard.
go down there, sir, and Mayor and Council, good afternoon. I want to thank you for scheduling this work session. This is a little bit different for us historically, but we had talked about it as a staff, and it really helps us out, I think, and as far as on the front end of the budgeting process. And that's really where we are. From, really this point forward, we will be the whole month of June and most of July, meeting with department heads, looking at revenue projections, expenditures, and really getting down into the weeds for budgeting. But we wanted to get with you on the front end and just go over a few things. And so I appreciate you scheduling the time to be able to do that. And I've got quite a few slides, but don't let that scare you. I'm not going to, unless you see something you'd like to specifically ask, we're not going to spend a lot of time in minutia or detail, but please ask questions or write the questions and things that you have that you've been thinking about, and we'll certainly spend as much time as you want to do on that. So we're going to, kind of hit some highlights. The first thing is just to show you a little bit about the budget and some of the things we go through. And of course, one of the big items is revenue. We want to start and build our budget based on revenue projections and certainly make our budget fit within those projections. This is a graph of property tax revenue, and it's a historical look back to 2009, and it gives you the revenue that is generated off of property taxes. And this year, 2015, our certified values yielded 28 million, or will yield toward the end of the year, $28,327,622. So this is the actual number that we will get during this current budget year. Next year, we've gotten our preliminary certified values out, and it looks like, we're going to be flat or maybe a little bit of an increase, hopefully, in our property values, which will help as well. But we will not have those certified numbers out until July 25th, right before the other budget presentation. Sales tax revenue is another big part of our general fund revenue stream. And we've seen the last 2 or 3 months of decline in our sales tax from what we projected. We got those numbers out, and the last month it was down 2.5%, previous month 7.6%, and then before that 0.81%. So although it's still down for this month, maybe we hit a bottom last month and we're going to at least trend up a little bit or not lose any more. And really what that shows us is that we expect 2015 actual to collect $21,668,000. That's our projection that we're projecting forward by the end of September, and you'll see it's down from what we budgeted in 2015 of about $425,000 by the end of the year. So hopefully, if we can eat into that number a little bit if we've hit the bottom and kind of come back up. But sales tax, we really keep a good eye on that, and if it does keep trending down, then toward the end of the year we adjust our expenditures appropriately and accordingly. We've already asked the directors to watch discretionary spending, even though it's budgeted. We don't want to be caught by surprise on that at the end of the year. Quickly, these are how our tax rates, for informational purposes for some of the newer members of the council. This slide, I think, really tells a lot. It's a historical look of tax rates. And our tax rate really are made up of two components. We have the debt rate portion, and that's the portion of rate that is levied against the property value to pay the bonded indebtedness payments that we have every year. Of course, the latest amount of debt the voters approved in 2011, the street bond issue, and so that debt rate is levied by the exact amount that it takes to pay our debt service for that coming year. And it fluctuates. You'll see it's different a little bit, and it's all dependent upon the property value, the certified value when it comes up. But as you can tell, our tax rate's been very stable, and really the only increase has been voter-approved increase to pay for the bonded indebtedness that we have. These are general fund revenue sources, and when for the newer members, we have basically two big funds that we talk about. We have more than that, but general fund is a big one. That's what's supported by sales tax and property values and fees and fines. And then we have water and sewer fund, which is a fee-based revenue fund for water and sewer, solid waste, and others. But we primarily focus on the general fund because people obviously are interested about their taxes and those things. So here's what you can see. The main thing, property values and sales tax, of course, make up about, 65% of our revenue stream for general funds. So that's how important those are to us. Here are the expenditures that come out of that, and of course, fire and police, public safety, as is appropriate, take up a lot of, over half of the general fund, obviously, is spent on public safety. So it is a core service that cities are obligated to provide, and it's appropriate that a lot of the general fund does go to fire and police. Parks, street, community services, general government, and it shows you the breakdown of this current year that we're operating under. So I like to show this slide. It really kind of shows where we think we're going to be at the end of this current budget year in September. We started 14 and 15 in October with a fund balance of $14,685,527, which is a 21.49% fund balance. And we're projecting our year-end revenues, and this is with sales tax and all the other projections, to be $63,973,403 for revenues. Our expenditures we're projecting to be that number over $68 million, and I want to talk about that at this point. If you first blush at that, you would think, well, we're spending a lot more than we took in, and I want to point out that the overage, the $5 million difference there, if you will, is really attributable one-time expenses that council approved for those. And speaking of those one-time expenses, just to let you know, at the end of the budget year, that $5 million was made up of the George Ritchie Road number. We spent $1 million to finish that up. That was spent out of the fund balance. We appropriated $3 million for the animal shelter out of that budget, or one-time expenses for that construction. Fire pension, we put $105,000 out of fund balance there. We purchased a fire truck for $680,000, and then we purchased some real property for $151,500. So when you net that out, that's the reason for that overage. So at the end of this year, even with the reduction in sales tax, unless it falls further, we're going to end the year, I think, with a really good fund balance of 15%, $10 million. The other important part of this slide, we're required council policy to keep a 10% fund balance reserve in the general fund. So we like to show what the difference is, and that we're projecting to be nearly $3.5 million of additional funds that are unencumbered, if you will, that are available to council for projects or whatever you choose to do with that.
Mr. Willard?
Yes, sir. Yes.
When you listed the number, then that $5 million that was used last year, and you say this is what's available this year for projects that we may choose, what are the restrictions upon those projects that we might choose?
I don't think, to my knowledge, there'd be any restriction. It's unencumbered fund balance from something in the general fund category, which is pretty much anything, parks, recreation, any capital projects you might want to spend it on. It's unencumbered, and I think whatever you choose to do in the way of a capital project, certainly you can spend it any way that council chooses.
Thank you.
Do you have anything on that list? Like last year, we talked about fire trucks and things that were going to go on that list. Is there anything?
We have a couple of things
Okay,
here
we're just not there yet.
that we'll get to that
Okay.
might be choices, and then obviously council can decide completely differently or whatever. But we do have a few things that were related to comprehensive plan items that we might begin to look at. Yes, ma'am.
Could you go back to that slide in the general fund where it shows the amount allocated for streets?
Yes.
Okay. So is that 8.25%? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm getting
Yes,
the
ma'am.
blues
I believe
off,
that's the
my
color.
vision's off. Okay.
Now, that's just general maintenance item. I don't think that includes any capital bond projects that we're currently
Right.
doing. That's just street maintenance.
Right.
And we do have a lot of street bond money projects that we're currently doing now, and we'll
Right.
finish up over the years. So that's for maintenance.
Is that the same amount that we had last year? And as far as streets, is that about the same percentage from the general fund?
Pretty much about the same.
Okay, because I thought it was about 8. Okay. Thank you.
David, go to the fund balance screen, please.
Mm-hmm.
Is any of that a restricted reserve like OPEB set-asides? or-
That's netted out of there,
Okay.
the OPEB. We do have, is that right, Angela? We do have money in that year end that is in the OPEB. And OPEB is other post-employment benefits. It's for our health insurance fund. We have to keep so much back from an actuarial standpoint to reduce our liabilities as much as we can. And I think it's, what, $1.5 million, Angela? About 1.5 million that we have. But that's netted out of there. So the available fund balance is that 3,491.
And that's all unrestricted?
Yes. And of course, that's just an estimate at this point. We don't know how the year will end, but that's kind of what we're projecting. Okay. Water, wastewater. This is, and we'll go to the next slide. We could spend a lot of time here, but historically, over the years, Longview, up until the last 5 or 6 years, and we could show you another slide where typically you'd go along and not raise water rates for 3 or 4 years, and then all of a sudden you'd have a spike in them that, and that's kind of been what we had done historically. And 4 or 5 years ago, we went on a plan to try to raise the rates a little bit every so often instead of the big spikes and hits in the water rates. And I'll show you a little bit some of the reasoning behind that. But the water fund, you have to be part meteorologist, is that the right word as well, because all the rain, which has been a godsend, our revenues in the water fund are abysmal right now. So, and that's just one of the reasons people aren't watering their lawns. Well, we've already have a lot of expenses that we have to keep ongoing, and so it's typical we use a lot of fund balance, but we have to set our rates differently based on how much rainfall we think we're going to get, which is a trick. And obviously this year, our water and sewer fund has taken a pretty good hit. And these things and these proposals are just very preliminary. And please understand, we've got a lot of budgeting to do as we go forward, but we wanted to kind of get this out there, and these can change, obviously. But we feel like that we need to propose a small water rate increase in this next year, and it would come in the we have when our rates broken out and our minimum water bill, and then the not the actual, the incremental rate for water above these amounts sold. And for a 5/8 inch meter size, which a lot of the older meters in Longview are 5/8, it's $10.35 a month and that buys 2,000 gallons minimum a month. And then if you go over that, then you're charged at that incremental rate. And we would like to increase that to 10.55 per month. And then on the 1-inch meter would go from $25.88 to $26.38. And then you can see and the big meters down there, you start getting to the industrial meters and those things. Most people, the newer homes in Longview, newer additions, most people have a 1-inch meter, but I don't think even replace 5/8-inch meters anymore. It's primarily all 1-inch, but that would be the increase that we're looking at. Okay, this is the per 1,000-gallon rate. This is above the minimum rate, and we're not proposing any change to that rate at all. So you have your base rate, your minimum, then from 2,000 to 50,000 gallons monthly consumption, you pay $2.55 per 1,000 gallons, and that would not change. And then you get into the big ones, you can see the various rates. So there would be no change or increase in that portion. Okay, on the wastewater side, we're not proposing any change on how we calculate for the wastewater. It'd be currently it's $12.25, and that is your minimum that includes that. And then the volumetric rate per 1,000 gallons over the minimum is unchanged as well. So this would be kind of a sample average monthly bill, the rate increase that we'd like to propose or thinking about proposing. So for a 5/8-inch meter, the average consumption of 7,000 gallons, it would be about a 20 cents per month increase onto to someone's bill. The 1-inch meter, 50 cents, and then the 2-inch would be $1.60 a month average for the average user. So this is kind of what it would look like on our projection with the rate increase in there, if you give us that. That's the revenue that we're projecting for next year, the expenses, and then we always move a certain amount of money into CIP. And we started doing that 5 or 6 years ago to help us pay and save more for projects instead of having to go out and issue revenue bonds or debt for that so much. Now, you know, and these water and sewer projects are so expensive that it's difficult to save enough money to pay cash, but we're trying to do that. And we're doing some projects now and paying cash for them out of that set aside that we've been doing. So we would move over another $4.1 million. The fund balance then under that would be 15.54% at the end of the next budget year. And council policy is a 15% fund balance number for the enterprise funds, the water and sewer fund. Another real important calculation, and I kind of hate to even talk about this, Councilman Moore is really the expert in this. I ought to turn the mic over to him, but so if I mess it up too much, Councilman, you can certainly correct me.
You got it.
And that is debt coverage ratio for the enterprise fund. When we issue debt and issue those bonds, our bond covenants require that we keep a coverage ratio a minimum of 1.25%. And this is the calculation that you go by to get to that. And depending on the rate, and you cannot use any fund balance in that calculation. If you've got some built up, you have to use just revenue. You have to use the revenue and set the rates that will raise that revenue. So it's very restrictive and it's tough to meet, and it essentially almost forces you to raise rates a little bit every year, basically is what it does. But you calculate your revenue and then your operations and maintenance budget, and you get a net revenue figure from that, and then you have to then do the calculation with your debt service. That's what we expect to pay on our revenue bonds out of the water and sewer fund next year, $7,672,000. And that'll give us a coverage ratio of 1.73. Now that's above the 1.25, but it does not take very much at all to really throw you below that 1.25 ratio. And if we do, technically we're in violation of our bond covenant. So we try to, to make sure we have proper coverage on that.
And the city has historically, I think it's even in the policy to maintain 1.5 times, which is over and above the minimum from the bond covenant. So we're well above that.
Right.
So that looks good.
Any questions there? Sanitation rates. Go to the next slide, Sean. I want to spend a little time here and talk about that. And of course, I'm going to fall on my sword a little bit on this one because we, completely rolled this new sanitation program out last August, nearly a year ago. And, we've had the routes, and quite frankly, it's not been the smoothest operation for several reasons. And the first thing, it's not because of a lack of effort in our sanitation department or Dwayne Archer, who's over that, or Rollin. It has been a monumental task for them to roll this thing out. It's a complete different system, and all those people have worked very, very hard in that. We've had a lot of hiccups. We've had to change our routes a lot and really play with those to be as efficient as we can. But we've had some issues, and we're getting a lot better at it, but it just takes time to rethink the way that we do those things. The other thing is we felt like we could do it with 8 trucks out there, and the way it's turned out, we just have, and I should have been the one to bring this forward, but we tried to do it, we cut it too close on the equipment that we felt like we would go out there to try to save expenses and not raise the rates. We really need 2 more trucks in our fleet to really go forward and to make the next step. So the other thing is we did not change the way we operate. We gave people the ability, if you want to just lay your bags out and not use the carts, we'll just not change at all. And that slows things. Our pickup times really plays havoc with our schedules. The other thing that's really hurt us is that on yard waste, for instance, and things, a lot of the people that are in that business, they'll leave 20, to 50 bags at a time out there that we pick up, just like we normally do. But, it's hard to calculate all that in when we're trying to run new routes and all that business. So we've had a few hiccups, but we think we've got it in sight, and it's going to get a lot better. But I really want to point out that these guys and ladies have really worked hard on this thing, and it's been a learning curve for all of us. But here's some of the goals that we started with that. We wanted to increase the recycling participation and volumes, and that has happened. I mean, our recycling has gone through the roof, which we wanted that because it is reducing our landfill costs. We don't have to put in all the recyclables in there. We wanted to spread recycling collection to more than one collection day. Previously we had the little blue tub, and on Wednesdays that's when you got picked up. Now that's spread, throughout the week. A couple of things, and we continued to collect the same type of items and the same way. If people didn't want to use it, they didn't have to, and there was no enforcement. And that was by design. We wanted to try that out. We continued to operate without a bag limit, and that'll be a topic for discussion, in the future, how you want to go about that. It's tough to have these efficiencies in there if you don't have some of those limits on that. But that may be the way we want to do it. But it's a discussion that we'll need to have.
David,
Yes, sir.
Can I interrupt you just 1 second? The point you bring up about slowing it down by having to get out and do the bags, most of the residents that I've talked to about this that have the complaint is the fact that they don't like the huge recycle bins and the trash bins because they have no place to store them because they are bulky and they do require space. Mm-hmm. And I had a resident said that his daughter lives in Austin, and they do the same type of recycling, and they provide big bin, the big ones like we have now, but they also provide small ones that the trucks can still pick up in the exact same way for people who want to use them but don't want to have the big bins because they have no place to store them because they can't get their cars in their garages and things like that. So it's something we should at least look into. I don't know what the cost effectiveness of that
So
would
their
be.
equipment can pick up
The same
various
equipment-
sizes
The
of.
same equipment picks it up. It's just a smaller version that people can use in their garages.
Yeah.
So they don't, interfere with them pulling into their garage with their cars and have to leave them out where they're unsightly and whatnot. Because a lot of people, I mean, if you look at the statistics, most likely, people that use the big bins are the ones that have certain age group kids and are a certain age, and those younger and those older will never fill those bins up in a week.
Right.
And so they would just be happy to have a smaller one that will still be picked up in the same fashion, and it might improve our efficiency having to get out and not pull bags into the trucks. So something we might look into.
Sure.
I think it was a good idea that someone at least proposed, and so I'm glad we brought this up to.
We're open to all suggestions.
Absolutely. And that's
Yeah.
what we should be doing. You know, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it does no harm to explore.
And really, the bottom line is if we want to keep the same service and let people do a little of all of it,
Right.
we underestimated the number of trucks we needed to be able to do that. If we were just doing and not providing the extra things like we had talked about, or letting people do, we could do it with the trucks we have, but we just underestimated that and, tried to cut it back too close, so. Okay, well, we'll certainly look into that and get some ideas on that. The other reason, in FY13, we were ready, we needed, into the old system, needed to implement what we felt like would be a $1 increase on the rate per month. And we, said at that time, if we go to this system, we can forego that. And we have done that for the last couple of years. We've not, implemented that rate increase because of that. We've also utilized alternative fuels and the emissions, and that's worked, to my knowledge, very well on those vehicles and the fueling stations that we have in place. So I think that's a real positive. And just real quickly, some areas that we need to refine, continue to decrease our collection times to improve efficiency. Sometimes you'll see us out at 9 o'clock at night finishing up and things like that. And we want to certainly reduce that down if we can. We want to continue to increase the recycling. And then divert the yard waste over into the compost. So if we can, adjust some things on the yard waste part of it, that really takes up a lot of time for that just to be unfettered or unrestricted, all the yard waste out there. So, as again, we're just getting into this, and we'll have a lot more as we go forward. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. In regard to the 2 trucks, are we looking at employees too? Because I'm guessing we will need some additional staff. Because I've seen our guys, they're doing a great job, but they are working very late.
Right.
So how many are we looking to?
New staff, Dwayne, if you get another.
Initially, we talked about going down to 12 drivers.
Okay.
We budgeted for 14, and we've had to keep those 14.
Right.
So we're really looking probably at 16.
16.
16 would make that happen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Sean. This is our we are proposing a rate increase to help out here on to purchase another truck. Currently, it's $14.95 per month for the residential, plus our fuel charge, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. 2 or 3 years ago, or 4, when did we break that out?
9 years.
9 years ago? 9 years, we broke that out and just charged the residents for the actual fuel usage instead of just keeping it in there, and that way, you can break it out and you get advantage now of the lower fuel prices. That's exactly what we passed along. So anyway, we'd be proposing to raise that to $16.35, which would be I think what, $1.40 rate increase, nothing on the commercial. And this chart's a little bit busy, but if we can take just a moment to kind of look at the historical look on our sanitation rates. The blue line is the rate, the red is the fuel charge, and you can see where what those fuel prices have done. In the last couple of years, obviously, it's a little bit more beneficial to the ratepayer. And instead of budgeting a number and just leaving that and never giving everybody the benefit when they're down, this is I think, a fair way to budget and to pass those to the ratepayer, and they've had that benefit. And then the green bar is the effective rate, which is the total with the fuel charge in there plus the base rate. currently, and so if we go to the 1635, but you can see in 2012 and 2013, that was really when we really needed to come ask for a dollar increase at that point, and held off on that by going to this system. And now we need to do it, feel like we need a rate increase. So these would be that rate increase in there at this point. That would be the revenue and expenses that would generate. And we would like to purchase one more side loader, which would be an expenditure of $320,000. And then the rest of that rate increase would really gets us above the 15% fund balance number. If you do the math on that, the rate increase will generate more money than $320,000 by, what, 50 or 60,000, and that helps get us up over that 15% in the fund balance. Now, you know, and this is something we can all discuss, and this is one reason we wanted to get in front of council early. Honestly, we probably need to have 2 new trucks to really do the job. But that would, you know, obviously cost more money. And so, you know, we're coming asking for one, and let's see how that goes. And this time next year, if it's really, you know, beneficial, then we may want to look at that, you know, next year. Did y'all have any other questions on solid waste or any of that? I'm going through these, so please stop me or take notes, and we can dwell on any or all of them, or go back or keep going. Yes?
Did you do the numbers, just out of curiosity, where the fund balance would fall if we did purchase 2? How far below, or would it fall below the 15%?
It'd fall below. With this projected $1.40 increase, if we did 2 trucks, it would fall below the 15,
Okay.
about
Ooh.
12%.
Ouch. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. The next thing I think we kind of is new on the horizon, so to speak, is the animal shelter. We let the contract and broke ground in, what, May, April? We got a slide? There it is. We broke ground March the 2nd. On that, council approved the contract, and we've not really made much progress because of the weather and the wet. It's hurt our water and sewer fund, and it's also caused some delays in the animal shelter. But we feel like that currently, if things hold, we will complete that project in April of 2016 and be ready to open the doors and ready for business at that point. So we're going to need to budget some things in this year's budget in anticipation of that opening. You know, the last thing we want to do is not be ready when the doors on that shelter are ready to open, and we're not ready. But out of this budget, we feel like we need to go ahead and hire an animal shelter director, and we are in the process of doing that. We hired a search firm, and we're well into the process. I think we've got 12 candidates. We've had more than that, but we've had 12 that we've narrowed down, and we're doing further research on them. And I suppose we'll probably narrow it down to 5 or 6 candidates to bring in for interviews for that position. We feel like that we need to get that person on board as quick as we can, because a complete startup from the ground of really a whole new department is going to take a lot of work for getting policies, getting ordinances together and ready, personnel policies. We're folding in animal control into that operation. So we're also going to be needing to work on contracts with other cities or entities that we're going to contract with for our revenue stream. So there's just a lot of, we've got to hire people, a lot of work that's going to need to be done. And we feel like time is of the essence of getting that person hired. And we're not behind schedule, but we're moving along on that and have some more to talk to you about later. So we'll have also in that budget a full year of the animal control salaries. Now, that's not a net increase to the budget, but we're still operating them now as we go for a full year, but we're dividing these budgets out into the proper places. And then planning on 6 months of shelter operations in this current budget. So, and we feel like that'll include 15 full-time positions. The idea going in was to have a full-time veterinarian. Now, there may be some ways that we can lessen some of that with volunteers or whatever, but that's kind of what our projections have been. 4 part-time positions, and then obviously, very conservative revenue projections because we, won't have a lot of revenue at that point coming in. So this is a preliminary budget that we're building into this current one for 15-16. A total expenditures of $1,203,000, the revenues of $206,186, and then the ACO budget, which is ongoing anyway. And then we're still going to have to contract with the Humane Society Animal Shelter for 6 months, and that's the figure we're projecting. So really the net increase this first 6 months that we're looking at to build in our budget is $551,000, which is pretty close to what we had talked about in last budget year about the first year startup, the net increase. Okay, now I wanted to talk a little bit about pay structure and spend quite a bit of time here. The first, it's been since 2013, mid-year, where we had a general across-the-board pay increase for city employees. So we wanted to, this year we met with our administrative budget or administrative team probably in March or April. When did we do that? April. And just to lay out budget discussions with our administrative staff to go back into their departments and to look at. And one of the things we asked them to do is to look and to budget a 3% across the board pay increase for all their employees, for all departments. And we asked them to make it revenue neutral as possible. In other words, we asked them, said, look, instead of the way we've done it in previous years where we get our budget built and then say, oh, if we do an increase, then we got to ask for an, this year we wanted to do it, but asked them to find a way to fit that in their budgets if they wanted to promote a pay increase for the people that they work for. So that was the task that was given, and they're submitting their budgets now. And of course, we're going to be spending the next months on departmental budget meetings to flesh all this out. So we've asked them to make the 3% as revenue neutral as possible. So that's kind of in our projections. So with that said, Mayor Mack asked me to put together and to look at how we pay our police department and our officers in the police department. Mayor, please jump in anytime you'd like to talk about this, not to take any words out of context, but obviously, we have had a very rough year, beginning in January, basically, in Longview with different things, and not to rehash all of that. It's been hard on the police department, it's been hard on the communities, and we want to make sure, and the mayor wants to make sure, and I know the rest of you do too, that we address things we need to address to try to bend that curve a different way, if at all possible. And we're looking at a lot of different things in community policing and our PAR officers and how we communicate and deal with the public and those things. But the mayor asked us to look at pay, and he asked us to look comparing to Tyler. And if you look at, and I think one of the things is obviously we have a lot of unfilled positions in our police department. And before I became the city manager, right before, and maybe it was a little bit, maybe Mayor, I don't know if you were on the council at the time, but the council authorized 15 or something additional positions several years ago, and that's what got it up to, I think we have 172 sworn positions. And that was approved by city council several years ago, before I got here. and we've never been able to get up to full strength for whatever reason, maybe once or twice for a short period of time, but we've never been able to fill those vacancies. And we spend a lot of money recruiting. I know our chief and our administrative staff put a lot of effort into recruiting. Some of it, we lose people to the oil field, some of it for various reasons, retirement obviously, but we've never been able to do that. Tyler has kind of been a different story. For instance, our turnover rate for the Longview PD for FY 13-14 was 10.83%. And if you look at Tyler, theirs average is 4 to 5% a year. So what is the difference there, and how does that affect how we do our policing efforts? And obviously, if we're at full strength in our force, we can do a better job. That's just pretty obvious. And so Mayor asked us to look at the salary, the compensation piece in that puzzle to see if we can find some things that we're looking at. So we've got that, and just to show you and not to look at every little line item, but on the right, the current pay structure for Longview Police. Of course, public safety has pay steps in their plan. That's different from the general government. Teachers, a lot of them are on step plans. But our market average to the top step takes 13 years in our current structure for police officers to move up and to step up in those plans within their ranks. In our current plan, it's front-loaded with eight steps over 8 years. So, in our plan now, you get a lot of steps early, but it's front-loaded. But where we're having problems is in the sergeant-lieutenant steps, the spreads over 4 years. Then obviously we're way below, as you'll see, below the market in our compensation. So. You can see that's the pay plan, and you can see you have the entry level, the police officer, the first year level, and then you have 8 steps in our police for police officers, and then they're topped out after 8 years. And the only time you get a raise is when, or other compensations when you get a general government across the board kind of a deal. Sergeants, and Chief, jump in here anytime you need to on this, but we have a hard time, by the way we're structured, for our police officers wanting to go into the sergeant rank because of the way our structure's set up and the way the pay is. And we want to try to find a way to address and retain these officers in the sergeant, lieutenant areas with more experience and those type of things.
Mr. Willard,
Yes.
if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And I appreciate all that you all have done and all the information that you've given us, because this has been a major issue for Longview for quite some time, and it was certainly an issue throughout the campaign, and that was my primary objective throughout this, was to try to solve some of the problems we're having with our police. And if you look, the reason I've asked you to compare to Tyler is because it's just very simple. What they're doing is working, and they're just 35 miles down the road. So I don't see any reason for us to compare to other areas that aren't relevant to us, because that's very relevant to us. So Tyler is a benchmark that we need to be looking at. Therefore, I think that wheel does not need to be reinvented. It's working there. If you look at their officers, and I wish these were my figures, they're not, but Mary Ann has been so good in getting me figures and helped me to understand these things. But, we want tenure in our officers. We want the community policing where the people know the officers and we know them, and it makes for good relationships. It makes for better policing. It makes for better citizens. It makes for less crime. But we're having trouble doing that because we don't retain our officers. And if you look at what Tyler does, they're 20-plus year veterans. They have 60 officers with over 20-plus years of service to their community. We have 27. That's a huge difference to me, 60 versus 27. So their rate of retention is better than ours. Why is it better? Well, it has to be looked at as it's better because the pay scale is different. So to me, this is a simple A plus B, and let's see if we can make it equal C. And so I appreciate all the things that you all have done to prepare for this so that we can take a very, very quantified look at what's going on and make a very easy comparison and let's see if we can't retrofit that to what we're trying to do to improve our situation in Longview. So, I mean, I appreciate what you all have done, and I thank you for the effort involved. Unless, as we go through this, I think we're going to see that these differences are there. They're there for reasons, and I think the reasons are being reflective in how we have been the last few years in Longview. So,
No, I think when you look at the numbers, it's obviously a huge difference. Okay, so for just a benchmark frame of reference, the Tyler Police pay structure, Tyler Police Plan also has steps, and they have 10 steps for their officers, and it's spread over 19 years. So their tenured officers, they don't top out like ours at 8 years. They have an incentive to keep, you know, and it's spread out, and you don't top out and get stuck in the deal. Their sergeant and lieutenant's steps are spaced over 9 years. So when you get to those middle ranks, you still have more room and more progression along. And then also their pay plan salaries are, you know, above the market, and ours are way below. Okay, now this is really busy, and I apologize for not giving you a copy of the slides yet. Because you want to probably have these, and we'll email them to you. Or if you want to hang around after the meeting, we'll make copies. And I failed to get those to you, but we will get all this where you can look back at this. You might just look at for instance, you see the current Longview, and you see the officers top out at 8 years, a police officer, $57,653. And in Tyler, they top out in 19 years at $69,959 for a police officer. And then over on Longview's plan, you see the sergeant entry, $63,000, and a big difference for the entry for sergeant over there. And then they have 3 steps. Now, I think actually we want to add another step to what Tyler has, but that's at the beginning, isn't it, Marianne, at the step 3. We would actually add another step that they don't have to kind of fill in that gap as well. So Longview, if we go to a plan just like Tyler's with their market values, it'd be 11 steps over 19 years, and unlike Tyler, we would add another step at year 3. Pay would increase for every officer. The greatest impact in this plan would be 2 officers with 7+ years of experience, and I think that's kind of the target where we're trying to, to target. And you'll see that's, the entry level is roughly about the same. We'll have a comparison in a minute, but on the cost of it, for us to go to that plan would cost $1,187,724. Now, I want to explain, we have a net cost, and that's $781,917. And the reason we have that netted out is because we had asked everybody to build in a 3% number into their budgets, and that included police. So there's already money that the police have in their budget. So net to the police budget, to go to Tyler's plan in this upcoming budget year would be a net increase of the 781, and then all other employees in our proposal would get a 3% across the board pay increase. The police department, in lieu of a 3%, would go to this system. Okay.
Mr. Willard, if I
Yes,
might
sir.
add again.
Sure.
And correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been given a lot of information from a lot of people, but if you look at the discrepancy between 20+ years of service between Tyler and Longview, 60 officers versus 27, that's 33 officers difference. Meaning we're having to retrain a whole lot more officers than what Tyler's having to retrain. And my understanding is it's a lot more expensive to retrain a new officer than it is to hire one and keep them. Mm-hmm. And the figure I was giving was $100,000 for the first year to train an officer. And if that's anywhere even close to a figure, if you're looking at 33 officers difference, that's $3.3 million just to train officers that they keep that we don't. But even if it isn't a close figure, if it's half of that, we're spending a lot of money retraining than we're spending more money retraining and losing than we will be to pay a little bit more and keep. The way my figures work, I'm not a mathematician, but I mean, that's pretty simple math to me. Is that not
I
correct?
believe your figures are real close to it. And you're right, it does cost a lot of money to hire a new officer. Once they go through the academy, then they have to go through field training, and it's nearly a year before they're able to work out by themselves. If we hire someone that is already licensed, it's much better for us, but we find that many times the people that are applying are someone else's problems that are trying to come work here. So in reality, we would like to have officers that are already licensed that can come on board, that can go through the field training office program. But what we mainly get, our bread and butter, are just brand new people. So,
Which that's okay, as long as you're just retraining them once. I don't
Yes.
retrain new officers 7 or 8 every 5 years as they're leaving. And I think if we can find ways to retain them, which I think this process will, then in the long run, even though it's costing more upfront, in the long run, we're going to save a lot of money if we retain our officers rather than lose our officers the way we have been in the past, at least the way my figures work. Thank you, Chief.
Mayor,
Chief,
have we done this same analysis since we're in public safety with the fire department?
no, sir. Not compared to Tyler's, no. Well, we have looked a little bit, but we just primarily focused on this. We did market, and this goes into a whole nother subject about what kind of compensation plan we have. It's based on market, and we have different cities that, we've been using historically for our market. Tyler, one of them, but it's a group of cities. And all of our other, and police was included in this as well. If we go to our market, then we have not done a market study update for fire or police or anybody except this for for police. But we'd have to do some more work on all that, obviously.
And Mr. Moore, we will do that. It's just, at this point, we're not leaving fire out, because I've already made the declaration, we're going to be known as a public safety city all across the board, and police and fire, both public safety. We're just having the crisis right now with police, so we have to take care of that
understand.
first. We're not leaving fire out. Fire's going to get their due, but we have to address this issue first in this budget cycle to get us back where we belong initially. But we're not going to neglect anyone. Our public safety is ultimately important to our community, and we're not going to, as a council, neglect anything or anyone in public safety.
Good.
Thank you for your observation.
Yes, ma'am.
Question. I really like the comparison, and I like that, the alternative program. What are those percentages like? I'm just curious, is there a blanket percentage from step to step, year to year? Is it like 2%, 3%?
It's dependent upon the step, but for instance, if you look at where we top out now at 8 years,
Right.
go into a 19-year level would be basically a $12,000 difference.
Right.
Sergeant is a $13,000 difference going from entry there to entry in the Tyler range.
Right.
So it's dependent upon the step and the classification.
So there are different criteria, I guess, with
Yes.
each step, like on an annual basis? Because I can tell the differences. I was just curious if there was a blanket percentage, like even though like year 1 to 2 or recruit to year 1, I didn't know, how do you come up with that number? I'm just curious.
Tyler.
Okay. Hey, I appreciate honesty. I like the plan. I think it pays for performance in the job. So, okay, fair enough. Thank you.
And the other fact also, we've also, trying to address the other pay increase for all other employees also. And, but we hope this would really be a real key factor in turning that thing around a little bit. Okay, like I say, I'll get you all these slides, and I apologize for that. The last thing, comprehensive plan. As you all know, we have, I think, ended up with 29, Sean, 29 different
Somewhere there about as far as the top priority.
yeah, priorities that came out of that comprehensive plan. And you know, they range from multi-million-dollar projects to do some of those down to some administrative things and all of that. And so we wanted to, in our budgeting and to get out before you, to start addressing some of these things that were the result of the comprehensive plan. And here's just a few of them that we've pulled out of there that low-hanging fruit, so to speak, that we might talk about. The first thing would be for development services, and that'd be a unified development code. And as you all know, we have just completely overhauled our development services department. Michael Shirley's our newest director. No, Scott's our newest director now. Michael, you're old hat now. Was it a year ago or a little over a year ago, Michael was named the director in that department. If you've not been down there, you need to go pay a visit to Development Service, what they've done in opening that office up to try to be more customer friendly when people come in instead of the way we had been operating. We've got nearly, how many, 80% in that department are new, fairly new? There's 8 or 9 new out of that whole department. And we have one more hire in there for a building official. We had Skip Whittle retired, recently, and we're down to the very end, I think, on getting that filled, and we'll be fully staffed and ready to go. And one of the big things that came out of the plan, and we've known this for many years, is we need to implement a unified development code. Currently, we don't see it on our website, and if you're a builder and want to come to town, you might have to go to 13 or 14 different books and reference back, well, if you do this, you've got to be sure and look at that fire code, but this is how many parking spaces. It's just all, we have it, but it's very cumbersome and difficult. And we feel like we've been wanting to do this, and it came through in the comprehensive plan, that it would, if we can have it all under one unified code where everything's right there and in one book or in one website, one area. If you live in Dallas and want to come build apartments on this particular, you'll know you can look at that and decide to see what the requirements are going to be based on what you want to do and not have to go to 9 jillion different places. So it will be, yes, ma'am.
As we're doing that, are we going to be looking at changing any of those codes or just pulling them together?
Both.
Because what I remember from the comprehensive plan was including things like sidewalks and looking at signs and looking at underground utilities. So that's all, we're talking about all of that right now.
And that'll be, yes, and that'll be something that council, that'll be a big decision you all will need to make. Not only are we pulling together, but what do you want in those? Do you want sidewalks to require that in these subdivision codes? And we're going to let y'all, we'll do exactly what y'all want, right? Yeah. Okay, but things like that. Property maintenance code. Now, we've talked, but that's an item that council really needs to be, that's what you want, and but that's exactly the time to change what we want in there and bring them all together. And it is a massive undertaking, and we feel like that, and we need to, there are consultants that do that for a living that we feel like we would need to hire to help us do it, and we think we can do that for $120,000 and get the consultant and get it all pulled together. We need to do some work on our TERS zone that we've talked about for a long time that's been a problem, but I don't guess that would be part of it. But things like that we're trying to address, and we're ready now, staff-wise, and to go forward and that would, I think, be a next step for making us more friendly to development and customer service. The next thing that was talked about out of the comprehensive plan were what they called small area plans. you know, we knew that downtown was a focus out of that comprehensive plan, and I-20 has been a focus for things, but they were just general overlook, you know, overview, bird's eye views of the concept of those areas, and for downtown, the city has spent millions of dollars over the last few years, and we have a great downtown, and the work that's been done, I think, has just been great, the aesthetics and the streets and the streetscapes and all of that. And but we kind of need to, if we want to make that a priority, we need to know, well, what do we want to do down there? You know, do you want to have an entertainment district? Do you want to have, and parking, as you all know, is a huge downtown issue. All these things we could address to take an area that you want to look at and have the consultant come and say, this, you know, from a marketing or a zoning or different things like that, here's your choices to really make downtown a focus, and we all kind of know which direction you want us to go, and we can do that with that. We think $100,000 to really do that plan would be an option. The same with Interstate 20. We had an I-20 task force a couple of years ago and looked at several different things with a hotel conference center idea also, and we feel like to really, you know, look at zoning and property and maintenance, all that, and where the market along I-20 really is for a particular deal, that we need to, you know, to do further work there. And then also came out a facility space needs study, and you all know that we are just really kind of in a desperate situation for space for the city. You know, we're hiring a new parks director, and the space we have for the parks department, the administrative offices, and trying to do sports tourism that we want to do and those kind of things, we really need some new space for them. The police department, all of our detectives are over in a building that we lease behind the police department. They're out of space. We just have a lot of space. City Hall, we're, you know, I'm going to have to start sharing an office with Sean, I guess, or no. What, are you moving in? Or?
I moved in last week.
Yeah, his cubicle's, Sean's cubicle's in the corner, and Keith and I are going to share desks, which may not be too bad, but anyway, we really need to do a needs assessment for space. We kind of know about, well, fire, you know, we have some fire station needs in the future we're going to have to look at. You know, we've got people all over town, and we kind of need to take a look at that. So something like that we feel like would cost about $100,000. Here's just some other things that are more capital projects. And like in the conference plan, some of that stuff obviously would require bond initiative and voter approved bond to really do some of those things that high dollar items, but continue to expand the trail system. The trails are probably one of the most popular things we have in Longview, and really need to, you know, I think the public wants us to continue with that. Lear Park, we're not finished with Lear Park. We've gotten to a point where we need to finish that out, and if we want to really pick up on the sports tourism piece of it, which is a great economic engine for us to take advantage of, we need to finish that. And so I think we need to implement and take a look at what exactly we want in there to finish it out with the property we have, and maybe other property acquired or whatever. Street, sidewalk, bike lane improvements on Green, MLK, and Moberly. And remember, it talked about road diets where you shrink those in nowadays. Instead of having the huge wide roads, you shrink them in, and then you can have pedestrian and other things, amenities along there as well. The police station expansion, fire stations 5, 7, and 8 really need to be looked at some point. City Hall expansion. We'd really love to have a new parks operations and maintenance facility, and we've just kind of kicked around somewhere in the Lear Park area would be a really neat place, I think, to have a nice administrative parks building where people can access for tournaments and all the things that they do. That's kind of a dream or a wish list, I think, for everybody. And then the Public Safety Police Fire Training Center. That's been talked about for a long time, and I think a joint facility, we need to somehow get the fire training deal out of that neighborhood. You know, that's just atrocious for the neighbors that have to put up with that, and we need to get that moved because training is so important on that. And you all know where I'm talking about, I think, where we have the railroad cars and all that. And every time we do a flare and all that, then obviously it's very, quite an imposition on the neighbors. So we'd like to have a facility that would house all of that. Okay, Sean?
Oh, sorry, we go back.
Yes.
What does planning for those mean? Like you want to include that in part of the budget, or?
Well, no, these are just kind of talking points that, you know, obviously I think most of these, there's a higher dollar attachment to accomplish these or some of these. For instance, the trail system, I don't know how far we extend it, but it's several $1 million, isn't it, to complete a trail system? You know,
To
of
extend
that.
it, or for the next section?
Yeah.
So like when we talked about earlier that we have the 3.5 unrestricted in our general fund, you're not proposing to take funds out of that to pay for this now, you're just kind of letting us know that these are your next
Right.
bucket items, but council could talk about spending funds on those things if we wanted to out of those restricted funds. But they're not, because they're not
Certainly.
restricted.
That's unrestricted money.
Okay. Then the other question I would have is about Paul Martin Jones, because that's on our agenda later. We're going to keep that facility, and we know that it needs improvements, or Broughton needs improvements. I mean, those are things we've recently talked about that probably should be on the list as well.
Yes, and that would be part of this needs and space study, needs facility.
Okay, so all of that will be included.
Well,
think?
you could include exactly what you wanted in there.
Okay.
If you say, yes, I'd like for us to, budget, some money to get started on a space and needs study, that, I think, wouldn't it be kind of part of?
Space and
we're
needs to
talking
me,
about?
I thought was thinking office, not like.
Ma'am?
I was thinking that meant like office, like city office space, but you're saying that could also include like Broughton.
I think so, isn't it?
Rec center type stuff, okay? I would love to include that.
Okay. Certainly do that.
So the slide before this one where you've got list, yeah, we're just gonna take out of general operating, we're not taking that out of the 3.5.
Well, it might, yes, we
It may come
probably
out-
would be.
okay.
Yeah, that would
Okay.
be, these are things that we would like to appropriate fund balance to do some of these things.
Okay.
It's going to be difficult to get all that out of and we're going to need to utilize some of that fund balance to balance
I'm
our
okay with that.
budget with the extra, with the pay issues and the animal shelter operations and those things. We're going to come and ask to use some portion of that fund balance to balance our budget. But this would be that we'd like, or for you all to decide. If we
Yeah,
go
no, I
back
like
to
all
that.
that, yeah.
I think, or y'all may want something else along here for us to look at. These are just a few items that we could certainly, I think, have enough to take out of the fund balance and not, cripple us too much and get started. The idea is we don't want to let that lay on the shelf and not do anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a huge effort, cost a lot of money, and we had a huge amount of participation by the communities, and we want to make sure we're trying to accomplish these things.
Okay, I like everything pretty much, of course. The Unified Development Code, $120,000. Bringing that together, plus the Property Maintenance Code, are we up to snuff? Do we have full staff on our code enforcement officers? Because I know we've been down. Where are we on that? I'd just like to ask, Mr. Shirley.
Michael?
In the code compliance division, we're full staffed. We've got 4 officers and a supervisor. One of the environmental compliance officers that was part of environmental health that deals with substandard and nuisance abatement that's been moved to the building department is currently vacant. And then we have some planning positions that are vacant as well.
If we roll this out, are we going to need additional staff to ensure that this is actually handled appropriately?
probably as we roll it out and ramp it up over the next course of years, I'm sure that there'll be a need for that.
And when do you expect to have the environmental position filled?
As soon as we have the building official nailed down, then we'll have that as one of their first order of business.
Okay, very good, thank you. Also, Mr. Willard, I want to ask about the downtown and the I-20 small area plans. We've talked about that for a long time as well. Is the multimodal transportation facility, will that fall under either one? Or when you say downtown, are we just speaking specifically Midtown, Longview?
Well, I think that's, y'all need to decide what do you want downtown to be
Okay.
in these considerations. You want just the traditional central business district area, or do you want to expand it
Okay.
from, say, Maud Cobb to the trains, what boundaries? And that's, will be part of the process that we would go to, is for you to decide what do you want downtown, the downtown footprint to be.
Because I would say in one of those, we absolutely will need to know, to include the transportation piece, because that's a big part of any thriving community. Facility space needs study. With that one, do we have any numbers? I'd be interested to know, how much are we paying in rent right now for, because I know we are
Good question.
leasing. If somebody could get that number, I'd just love to see it, and probably the whole council may like to see it. I'd be interested to see that. How much are we actually spending annually or each budget cycle on renting because of our shortage in office spaces?
We'll get that number to you.
Okay, great, thank you.
I would be interested in adding something to this list. I think these are great, immediate first steps, low-hanging fruit from the comprehensive plan, but I'd also like to do something tangible. Maybe it's something at Lear Park, maybe it's part of a trail extension, maybe it's something, but something that the citizens would be excited about happening as a pretty immediate result. I remember that as part of the plan, that we needed to do something quickly. So while we're doing something quickly, the results of all of these plans that we're talking about are going to be, a little bit out further. So I'd love to add something to that list that we could include.
You have anything you would like to suggest?
No, not specifically. We can talk about it later.
Well, there's 28 or 29 items from to all kind of price tags. But yes, we did want to step forward and make sure we're doing something
Yeah.
that we can report back to
I would like to
you,
just
and
add a little bit more on the bottom of that.
we can.
But overall, I think this is wonderful. I'm really excited about this. I love the administrative plans, all those studies. That's exactly what the comprehensive plan called for. That's wonderful. I think it's really important placing the priority on fixing our pay structure for the police. So thank you for doing that research. Thank you to our mayor for making that a priority. I think that's absolutely the right thing to do and the right response given our year so far. So I'm really excited about the budget. I was excited about all those things.
I'm moderately excited. Now, that's an in-house joke. They accuse me of being Chicken Little all the time.
Let me ask, Mayor, if I might, on the comprehensive plan, kind of a big picture type question. We're going to have a new comprehensive plan advisory committee, 7 members that are going to kind of keep this thing updated. Now, ultimately, as part of our annual budget, toward the back, we have a 5-year CIP. And so out of the comprehensive plan process, the 5-year CIP is going to be updated annually. And I assume eventually we will appoint a CIP advisory committee that will get down to the nitty-gritty of some of the costs of these items to plug into the 5-year CIP to, at some point in the future, probably have to have a bond election. So that's kind of the process we're looking at going forward.
That's, yes, sir, completely up to the council about your time frames and when you want to do that. That's completely up to you all.
You with me on that, Mayor?
With you all the way, sir.
Great.
When we hit the lottery, we're all over it.
Now, I will remind us that, and this is, I guess, why I'm Chicken Little, but we still have about $8 million of bonds to issue this budget year to finish up the $52 million that the voters approved. So, I mean, we're still issuing bonds. It's just dedicated. And if we have any, and Rollin and these guys are good because they're coming in their budget a lot, and we're going to maybe have some funds remaining that we can use for like kinds of projects like streets or other things. When we get down to the end in a couple of years, we may have a little bit left over, that we can knock one of these things out that's a like project that the bond attorneys would let us do. Well, that's a possibility as well. So, but the timing for your next bond election or effort is completely up to you all, and as you can read, a lot of that, you know, is significant cost attached to it. So, but that'd be completely up to you all in your timing.
Great job.
Okay, just to kind of finish up, for your calendars on Tuesday, July 28th. Now, I was going to say that's when we will present our formal budget. That's after we've gone through all the haggling and everything with the departments, and we have a budget we want to present to you. We'll have our certified values on the 25th of July, so we'll know our exact numbers as far as that goes. And by law, we need to, that's the last date I can present the budget to you, and we'll present that. And then there's a series of meetings we'll go to. My point was, anytime between now and then or after that date, anytime you all want to do this again and kind of see where we're at, or if you want to wait till the 28th, and then after that, schedule some more work sessions, that'd probably be my suggestion. You let us go through all our process and get it, and then if you want to have the 28th meeting at the next council meeting, we can have a work session just like this. So you can have as many as you want to. We just have to have 72 hours of notice. Then August the 13th, council meeting will be another council meeting. We'll have a budget discussion. Fee changes, we'll do our fee resolutions. And then the preliminary vote on the tax rate. These are all statutory sort of deals. And August 27th, you have to have a public hearing. And then you can read these others. We put those in that, and I don't know, we'll get you a copy of all this right after or during our break. We can do that for them. That's all I had. Do you have any questions or other things that you want us just to kind of go through our process and come back? And
I think you've done a great job, David, and all the staff. Thank you all for preparing this and getting us a platform to work off of, showing us the steps that are going to be required and what we're looking at, and I appreciate that very much. I think we have a lot of work to do, and I think we're going to be able to get our feet wet really quick.
Well, full disclosure, I've been on vacation all week, and I got in at 2 in the morning last night, so I didn't do any of this. They got all that together, so I appreciate all of y'all pulling me out of the fire. Is that the way to say that? Whatever.
Yes, very good job on all parts involved. Thank you all for your time and your efforts and for making it simple for us, because for those of us who have not done this before, and even if you have done it before, this can be overwhelming. We're talking about a lot of things with a lot of detail and a lot of intricacies that we need to be able to look through, and I'm grateful that we have a wonderful staff that we can go to for questions and answers, and you all do a great job. So with that, this work session is now adjourned.